Hi everyone, this is Harshit Raja for the recap from round 5 in Chennai Grand Masters. The tournament is heating up. We're already in the middle of the rounds and the leaders are already trying to establish themselves. This game was between Arjun Irigesi, who was trying to catch the leader Vincent Keimer. Arjun was playing against Pranav in this game. Arjun started with this move pawn to e4. Pranav played pawn to e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So far, this is all very well known. But in this position, Pranav chose a very unusual line. He played this move bishop to c5. Usually, we always see this move pawn to a6 going into the Spanish variation, or we see this move knight f6, which is the Berlin, which is quite prevalent at the top level. Pranav instead decided to surprise Arjun by playing this move bishop c5. Arjun played c3, trying to push d4, because as we already know, in the opening phase of the game, we want to occupy the center. After c3, Pranav played knight f6, pawn to d4, he captures d4, and now Arjun could have captured back the pawn on d4, but then maybe he was afraid that Black would play this move bishop to b4 check, getting a nice tempo and then capturing the pawn. That's why Arjun decided to play with initiative in this position. He sacrificed a pawn early in the opening and he played this move short castles. Pranav very quickly captured the pawn on c3. It seems as if Pranav was all prepped so far. Arjun played e5. He did not capture the pawn yet. He goes for e5, attacking the knight on f6. Black played knight to g4. Arjun now finally captured the pawn on c3. Black castled. Of course, taking the pawn on e5 would be very risky because white can take on e5, knight takes e5, and maybe rook e1 there, and it just feels as if white's initiative should cash in this position, and that's why Pranav castled. By the way, just to let everyone know, this was all blitzed out by Pranav. White played this move bishop to g5. Of course, you never want to play f6, spoiling your pawn structure in front of your king. That's why Pranav went back bishop e7. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and it's not easy to make these moves like queen e7 if you are not well prepared, because it feels as if white is getting this move knight d5 in with a tempo. Sorry, the white took is on f1. Black goes queen to d8. Now Arjun plays rook e1, protecting the pawn on e5. Pranav again blitzes out d6. White captures ed6. And Pranav took back with the c pawn. Black is a pawn up, so Arjun decided to take the knight on c6. B takes c6. And of course, he did not allow Black to voluntarily attack the knight on d5. He had this check, knight e7 check prepared, king h8, and now white captured knight takes c6. Hitting the queen on d8, Black played queen b6. Of course, white cannot capture the pawn on d6 because the queen on b6 hits the pawn on f2. So, this whole sequence of moves occurred right after the opening. After knight d4, Arjun was slightly better. He had like a small initiative after this move queen b6, but Pranav decided to defend very well. And this just goes to show how the opening is evolving. It's not just about playing the best moves. Sometimes you need to play some unusual lines to take your opponent out of your preparation. And I think Pranav displayed an excellent example of this, and he went on to draw this game against Arjun Irigesi. Very good result for Buddy Pranav. And this game was played between Dronavalli Harika playing with the white pieces against Abhimanyu Puranik, who has been doing exceptionally well in the challenger section. And in this position, it was white to play. Harika had a golden opportunity to get a big advantage against the tournament leader. Try to pause the video and find the best move for Harika in this position. And once you've thought about this position, I hope you found this incredible idea of white to play rook to d6. Wow, the move is so powerful that the pawn next to it fell down. The point is that we are sacrificing a pawn. if black takes on d6, takes back, and if he captures queen takes d6, the rocket has been activated. Queen can come into f6, queen g7 checkmate, queen h8 checkmate, everything is on the cards. You cannot play e5 because your queen on d6 is hanging. And that's why after rook to d6, maybe Abhimanyu had prepared this move knight to c2, but the following sequence of moves gave white a big advantage. After rook to c1, hitting the knight on c2, black goes back knight to d4, and we actually capture this knight on d4, c takes d4, and now there's a really beautiful move for white that gives white a big advantage. Can you try to find it? And the move is queen to f6, trying to exchange the queens. If black takes, you take back with the e pawn, and now both our rooks are hanging, but black can't take either one, because if you take the rook on c1, rook d8 is a checkmate. If you take my rook on d6, rook c8 is a checkmate, and there's nothing that black can do. I mean, white is also threatening rook takes d4, and this endgame is actually completely winning for white, thanks to also this pawn on b5, which is not only blocking this pawn, but also the pawn on a7 is backward. This would have given Harika a great chance to bounce back in the tournament. Instead, she played the move rook takes d8, black captured rook takes d8, bishop to c1. She was trying to activate her bishop from g5 to f6. Black played rook to d7, bishop to g5. Abhimanyu played queen f8. Harika replied rook d1, and I think this is what Harika was banking on, trying to exchange these rooks and get on the open line with the queen. But Abhimanyu, knowing him for a very long time, is a very tricky player. He always has some trick up his sleeve, and he had one in this position as well. The move that he played in this position is knight to c2, not blundering the rook on d7 because there is knight e1 check. If white takes, this would be a disaster because you are losing the queen and black is completely winning. And if you don't take, then black is going to reroute this knight from c to d4. The knight is amazingly placed here, and after this maneuver, Abhimanyu went on to win this game, moving to 4.5 out of 5 points, and now he becomes a big favorite to qualify for the Masters section next year. Will be interesting to see if Pranesh catches up. Let's now see what happens in endgame. And for the end game, we have a very special position between Jorden van Foreest, who was playing against Ray Robson. Jorden van Foreest lost 2 games in a row, but he proved why he's such a nice fighter. He bounced back with a win from this end game. He just gave a check rook to f8 to Ray Robson, and Ray Robson erred with this move king to g7. Jorden played rook to b8, knight to e2. Ray Robson tried to attack the pawn on c3, but Jorden is like, you can take my pawn on c3, because after rook to b2, the pawn on c3 was poisonous, because after knight c3, king d4, the knight is actually trapped, because if it goes to a4, rook b4, the knight is trapped. And if the knight goes to d1, then rook d2, again the knight is trapped. And that's why in this position, after rook to f8 check, it was very important that Ray Robson plays this move king to e7. The king had to be in the center, and the king would have been helpful to try and, in some positions come king d6, king c5, and trying to stop this pawn on c3. And that's why after king g7, Jorden was able to capitalize, having his king in the center and the black king being far away from the action. And that's how Jorden van Foreest went on to win this endgame. Very, very important that in the endgame you try to keep your king as centralized as possible. And that's it from round 5 of Chennai Grand Masters. See you all tomorrow.